Chapter 1 Prologue. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. The daily quest has arrived. A clear and articulate female voice spoke to him. This was not a video game, nor was it a dream. The voice spoke to him, only in his head. On top of that, an informative quest screen floated in front of him, waiting for his access. Can't be today too? With a heavy heart, he opened the quest and read its contents. Ring ring. Daily quest. The preparation to become powerful. Do 100 push-ups. Incomplete. 0-100. Do 100 sit-ups. Incomplete. 0-100. Do 100 squats. Incomplete. 0-100. Run 10 kilometers. Incomplete. 0-10. Warning. Failing to complete the daily quest will result in a penalty quest. He cursed as he verified its contents. Goddamn it. How many days has it been? -1. The A-rank hunter. E-rank hunter Sung Jin-Woo. It was a title that followed him wherever he went. Even as a hunter, his abilities were barely above that of an ordinary person. If it wasn't for his slightly more durable constitution or his slightly increased healing factor, there was but a little difference between him and a non-hunter. As such, his hunting career was riddled with a variety of injuries. There were even times where he towed the line between life and death itself. But he was not a hunter because he enjoyed the job. It was dangerous, filled with ridicule, and the pay was disappointing. If it wasn't for the fact that the Hunter Association provided support for the medical bills of his mother, he was more than ready to give it up and start an ordinary employment as an ordinary person. But how could he, a man in his 20s with no special talents or background, afford to pay the medical bills that amounted to several million a month? You could say he had no choice in the matter. And so today, with a silent cry in his heart, Jin-Woo took part in an association-supervised raid, same as any other day. Hunters who operated in the same area knew each other well. This was due to the collective gathering of all hunters in the area whenever a gate opened up. And today, the hunters who've gathered shared a cup of coffee while greeting each other. Oi, Mr. Kim, over here. Ooh, Mr. Park. What are you doing here? I thought you were done with the hunter business. That, the wife just got pregnant with number 2. Ha ha ha, is that so? Well, nothing better than a raid to fill the pockets of a hunter. Both Mr. Kim and Mr. Park laughed. You know, it seems like the association's been calling us less and less lately. Wonder if the rate of gate appearances decreased? Nonsense. It's because the guilds have been working harder than the association lately. Whenever large sums of money's involved, you just know the guilds pounce on 'em with that fiery look in their eyes. Well then, I guess this raid being supervised by the association means it'll be pretty safe, right? With a slight concern, Mr. Park took a look around the area. A gate ignored by a guild meant low pay, and a low-paying gate meant low difficulty. Of course, there was nothing in life that was 100% certain. Similar to Mr. Park, other hunters in the area shifted their eyes with nervousness. Perhaps. As he finished the coffee, Mr. Kim suddenly waved to someone he saw approaching in the distance. Oh, wait, look who it is. Mr. Sung. Hey Mr. Sung. Other hunters also looked at the newcomer with familiarity and relief. Hello. It was Sung Jin-Woo, briefly greeting Mr. Kim with a nod. Jin-Woo continued his walk. After he passed, Mr. Kim lightly chuckled and loosened his worries. So Jin-Woo came. Then this place should be safe. With his eyes widened, Mr. Park asked Mr. Kim, "What, is Hunter Sung Jin-Woo that strong?" Mr. Park wouldn't know. He started the job a little after you left. There's no hunter here who doesn't know Sung Jin-Woo that strong. Why is he working under the association? Then, why not freelance or join a large guild? Chuckling, Mr. Kim's eyes narrowed. You know what that man's nickname is? How would I know? Come on, spit it out. Humanity's weakest soldier. Weakest, not strongest. Listen to yourself. That kind of title belongs only to the S-rank hunters. That man over there is the weakest soldier. Probably the weakest hunter in all of Korea. Mr. Park furrowed his brows. If he was that weak, why would the hunters look so relieved at his appearance? A fellow hunter was someone who had to be relied upon in a raid. He could not understand the other hunters' reactions. Seeing Mr. Park's tilted head in contemplation, Mr. Park ribbed him with his elbow while laughing. Don't you get it? If Sung Jin-Woo appeared in today's raid, it means it's gotta be an easy one. the association wouldn't risk putting him on anything hard. Nobody wants to see someone die pointlessly. And now, Mr. Park's face brightened. Is that so? Coming back to the raiding scene after a long break, both he and his wife were laden with uneasiness and concern. But listening to Mr. Kim's words, his mood lightened up. Mr. Kim continued, once, that man got injured in an E-rank gate and had to be hospitalized for a week. A hunter got injured in an E-rank gate? Yep. Nobody expected someone to actually get hurt in an E-rank gate. I heard they didn't even take a healer class hunter. Seeing Mr. Park laugh loudly in response, Mr. Kim shifted his eyes toward Jin-Woo. Hey, not too loud. He might hear. Oops. Didn't think about that. Mr. Park shifted his eyes towards Jin-Woo and quieted his laughter. Fortunately, Jin-Woo appeared some distance away and probably couldn't hear their conversation. But he did. I heard everything, you geezers. Doing his best to ignore their laughter, he met their gaze and put on an ignorant smile. At times like this, he cursed his rather keen hearing. Did I come too soon? It was some time before the raid would begin. While waiting, Jin-Woo approached an association employee for some coffee. Could I get a cup as well? Hunter Sung Jin-Woo M2. I'm so sorry, we just ran out. A cold winter breeze slapped his face. Jin-Woo wiped his nose with his fingers. It was a rather sad day where even the coffee ran out just as he got to it. Why are you so stubborn about this whole hunter business, Mr. Jin-Woo? Sorry. Jin-Woo bowed his head. As she healed him, Lee Jue's face was filled with complaint. I'm not trying to get an apology from you. I'm just worried about you, you know. I swear, one of these days, you're going to get seriously hurt. Once you pass through the gate, you would be in the dungeon. The dungeon this time around was probably D-rank. Jin-Woo looked over Jue's shoulders at his fellow hunters. 10-something number of hunters were taking down monsters left and right. They did not appear to be particularly struggling. Yet here he was, injured. It was the role of the healer class hunters to heal the injured hunters from the rear. As a man who was hurt in nearly every raid he participated in, Jin-Woo was rather famous among the healer class hunters. Jue carefully asked him, do you perhaps have a reason why you can't quit? Jin-Woo firmly shook his head. He didn't like revealing personal details about himself so easily. I'm just doing this as a hobby. I'll probably die of boredom if it wasn't for this. Jue pouted in response. You'll end up raiding in the afterlife because of your hobby. Not expecting such a response, Jin-Woo laughed. Hey, don't laugh. You'll open your wounds. Jin-Woo asked while chuckling. Man, where did you hear such a phrase? Where else? Mr. Kim over there. Sigh, that geezer. As they laughed and conversed, the healing was completed. But it was too late. The raid was pretty much over at that point. Jin-Woo grimaced. I only killed one magic beast today. And even then, it was only an E-rank monster. Jin-Woo fidgeted with the E-rank magic core 4 in his hand. Such low-level magic core from an E-rank magic beast was barely worth 100,015. The fact that he put his life on the line to earn it made it seem all the more pathetic. I heard a magic core from a C-rank magic beast is worth at least few 10 millions. But to Jin-Woo, an E-rank hunter, the thought of taking down a C-rank magic beast was an impossibility. Suddenly, someone shouted, there's another entrance here. The hunters swarmed towards the voice. You're right. Really? Another entrance? As the first person noted, there indeed was another dungeon entrance here. A double dungeon. So they really do exist. A hunter with 10 years worth of experience. Mr. Song looked at the newly found entrance with wonder. Unable to see far into the dark tunnel, Mr. Song used his specialty, fire magic. The fireball that shot out from his hand flew through the tunnel, illuminating its darkness. However, the tunnel was deeper than expected, and the fireball eventually lost its energy and fell to the ground and quickly extinguished as a spark. Darkness returned before their eyes. Everyone, please gather around. As the de facto leader of the raid, Mr. Song gathered the hunters before him. Jue and Jin-Woo, having completed Jin-Woo's healing, also joined the crowd. Mr. Song addressed the gathered hunters. As you all may know, gates do not close until the dungeon's boss is taken down. Since our gate is still open, even though we've cleared all the mobs in the area, It appears that the real boss is down the tunnel. Mr. Sung gestured towards the newly found dungeon entrance, looking at each other. The hunters also nodded in agreement. The protocol in situations like this is to exit the dungeon, contact the association, and let them handle things going forward. But if we do that, and some other group of hunters take down the boss, there's a chance that our income for this raid will drastically decrease. The gathered hunters' expressions hardened. Mr. Park, who came here to support his expecting wife, looked doubly troubled. Postnatal care these days is really expensive. If he left now, the efforts he risked his life for would be wasted. And so I was thinking, what if we just went ahead and go kill the boss? What do you guys think? The hunters fell in contemplation. It was not a decision that could be made easily. Some knew that there was no guarantee that the double dungeon would be as safe as the one that they had just cleared. Others came to the conclusion that if the outer dungeon was this easy, perhaps the inner dungeon would be just as easy. Regardless, it was not a situation where everyone would be in agreement. Mr. Song faked a cough. Since there's 17 of us here, why don't we take a vote on this? And no complaining after the vote. How about it? At Mr. Song's suggestion, each hunter nodded in agreement. Mr. Songs was the first to raise his hand. I'll go. Mr. Park was the first to follow Mr. Song. I'll go too. Me too. Same here. One more vote for yes. Mr. Kim had also joined the Go group. But there were opposing votes as well. Let's not. I think we should wait on the association's judgment. As the yes crowd and the no crowd clashed at 8-7, all gazes fell on the two last undecided people. Sorry. Shaking her head, Jue voted no, putting the count at 8-8. Mr. Song turned and asked the last person for his vote. Mr. Sung notes: 1, several million won, several thousand in USD, his mother's medical bills. 2, Nim, Korean post-nominal honorific denoting high respect, falls somewhere between Japanese san and sama. Most service employees in Korea refer to customers with Nim. 3, Magic Beast, Masu, Magic Ma plus Beast Su. 4, Magic Core, Ma Young Syuk, Magic Ma plus Center, Middle Young plus Stone Syuk. That is, a magic stone at the center, middle of the Magic Beast, Magic Core. 5, 100,000 won, $90. Value of E-rank Magic Core. 6, few 10 millions, 1, several 10,000 in USD, value of C-rank Magic Core. Last time I clarify Korean won to USD equivalent. As a rule of thumb, just divide the KRW number by 1000 to get the USD. Chapter 2. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. The final decision depended on him. He fidgeted again with the E-rank Magic Core in his hands, then looked to his side. Jue shook her head at his eyes. She had a bad feeling about this. Well, even Jin-Woo felt the same way. Under any other circumstance, he would not have dared to jump into danger. After all, he lacked the skills and courage to do so. But Jin-Woo had a little sister, who was preparing for college. I don't have anything saved up for that apostrophe. He was 24 years old, but he had to give up on college due to their poverty. He didn't want that poverty to hinder his sister's life as well. Their lives were counting on every penny that came and went. Mr. Park wasn't the only one who needed money. Jin-Woo raised his hand. I'll also go. At his side, Jue let out a small sigh disappointedly. -2. Double dungeon. The tunnel went on and on and on. At the vanguard stood Mr. Song and other veteran hunters. Led by the light from the fireball in Mr. Song's hand, the party walked through the dimly lit tunnel. Mr. Kim spoke up from the party. Isn't this going in a little too deep? Maybe we should think about turning back. How long have we been walking? Mr. Kim checked his watch. About 40 minutes. When we take down the boss, we'll have 1 hour before the gate closes. Taking into account the time for the return trip, we still have a breathing room of 20 minutes, right? Then if we don't come across the boss after 20 more minutes of walking, we should leave, right? I suppose so. Nodding, Mr. Song pointed towards his back with his thumb. Hey Mr. Kim, it's dark ahead of me. So fall back a little bit. Mr. Kim looked at Mr. Song's fireball, then took out his cell phone and turned on its flashlight function. The light from the phone brightly illuminated their path. Looking back and forth between his fireball and the phone's light, Mr. Song quietly searched pockets for his phone. At the rear of the party walked Jin-Woo, who was injured, and Jue, who had no fighting skills. Jin-Woo scratched his head. "I'm sorry." "For what? Dragging you along like this?" "I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me." Jin-Woo discreetly read her expression. It was not a face without worry. Tilting his head, Jin-Woo carefully asked, "Are you sure?" Jue abruptly turned to face him. "Of course I'm not okay." "Are you in your right mind?" "Earlier, if the place you were stabbed in was just a bit higher, it would have pierced your heart." "And what about the injuries on your wrist and thigh?" "I barely healed all those." "And you're already jumping into another dungeon? Especially when you don't know anything about it?" At her rant, Jin-Woo felt himself becoming lightheaded. But she was not wrong. Jue was a healer class hunter, and more than that, a B-rank hunter, a rare sight in the association. If it was not for her healing, Jin-Woo would have probably succumbed to injuries that would have put his normal life out of commission, much less being a hunter. "I really owe her a lot." A healer class hunter. Not only that, a B-rank healer class hunter. Whenever a gate appeared, the association would request her as a healer, and of course, Jin-Woo would always find himself sitting or lying down next to her in treatment in their aids. "You're hurting, right? Please hang in there. You look familiar. Are you from that time you got hurt again? Seems like I see you again and again." "You said your name was Jin-Woo. Are you alright? Do you ever think maybe the hunter life isn't for you?" "You're here again." "Hold out your arm." "No, not there. You can mend that with just bandages." The other arm. Surpassing his gratitude, he now felt apologetic to her. Seeing his silent face, Jue felt bad about her rant and calmed down. "Are you really sorry?" "Of course." After some thought, Jue looked at Jin-Woo at her side, with corners of her mouth rising ever so slightly. "Well, maybe you could treat me to a meal sometime." It was not a response he expected. Shocked, Jin-Woo looked at Jue's face, now showing a mischievous smile. A girl. He remembered Jue was 20 going on 21. If she had cut her long hair into a proper length and put on a school uniform, she'd be a fitting image of a student. Imagining her in a uniform, his face blushed. Seeing his delayed response, Jue blew air into her cheeks and pouted. "Do you not want to eat with me?" It was then. Suddenly, a commotion rose from the vanguard of the party. "This is it, the boss room." Jin-Woo and Jue turned their gazes forward. There stood a giant door signaling the end of the tunnel. The hunters gathered before the door. "To think there was a door at the end of the tunnel. Do you think this was always here?" "First time I'm seeing something like this." Do you think it's dangerous?" As they quietly whispered back and forth, the hunters became uneasy. After all, their lives were on the line. They had to be careful. But too much care may impede progress, Mr. Song thought. "So you guys want to turn back after all that? To go back empty-handed?" He placed his hand on the door. "You're free to go back. I'll go alone." Mr. Song was a C-rank hunter with 10 years of experience. If it wasn't for the fact that he was past 60 years old, he could have probably raided under a large guild. So when such a veteran hunter spoke with confidence, the uneasiness of the other hunters slowly disappeared. "Now that I think about it," one of the hunters spoke of a rumor regarding double dungeons. "I heard that double dungeons have some crazy treasures." "Yeah, I heard some mid-level guild once found a double dungeon and shot straight to a large guild status. And wherever magic beasts may appears in a dungeon, they should all be the same level generally." And so the hunters thought, what if this double dungeon contained a phenomenal treasure? And what if the magic beasts beyond this door were the same level as before? Can't let that old man take all the treasures by himself. Of course, forget just postnatal. I could probably pay for a big private school, pay for the mortgage apostrophe. And just like that, the hunters' understandings became one. Even Jin-Woo renewed his determination. "I can't just return with a E-rank magic core. At the very least, a D rank. No, just even one more E rank is good enough. It didn't have to be a magic beast either. If we find treasure beyond that door apostrophe. It was a standard agreement that any treasures or artifacts found in a dungeon would be divided evenly amongst party members. This was different than the case where magic core from magic beasts would only go to the members who helped take a target down. If I can score big right here, I can rest easy for a bit apostrophe. Seeing his determined face, Jue asked from his side, "Is that really the face of someone who hunts as a hobby?" Jin-Woo shrugged. Who would risk their lives for work these days? But for a hobby, that's another story. What? As Jue put on an incredulous expression on her face, Mr. Song started pushing the door open. Creak. Through some unknown mechanism, the giant door opened easily as the 60-year-old man pushed. Bang! The wide open door revealed a large interior, and the hunters entered pushing past each other. "We should go too." Not wanting to fall behind, Jin-Woo took Jue's wrist and went forward. With redness creeping onto her face, Jue followed him. As the hunters' first steps fell onto the ground, the numerous torches that filled the walls of the area lit up, brightly illuminating the interior. The light went on. First time I'm seeing that. Something's different. The hunters surveilled their surroundings. It felt like the interior of a large temple. Like an ominous temple that would be hidden away deep underground. The floors, the walls and even the ceiling was covered in moss. Some hunters shuddered and noted, "Something feels wrong. Doesn't it feel like we're being watched?" The more fearful hunters fell to the rear, while the stronger hunters headed deeper into the room. "See, don't say such things. Let's just finish up here and go back." The interior was incredibly large, a wide area in a dome shape. It was comparable to multiple Olympic fields being put together. No, perhaps bigger. At the same time, it paradoxically felt cramped. The reason was simple. That thing. That's not the boss, is it? At the end of the room, something whose size surpassed reason and logic sat upon a grand and enormous seat. It could only be described as a massive statue of God 1. My God 2. Whoa, they could not help but be amazed. Jin-Woo himself compared the statue's size to America's Statue of Liberty 3. If the Statue of Liberty sat down, it would probably look like that. Although the Statue of Liberty is female, and this one was clearly male. No, this thing's bigger apostrophe. The hunters gathered before the statue could not help but gulp repeatedly. They stood in fear, wondering if the statue of God was the boss of this dungeon. But the statue did not move. Phew. Mr. Song also sighed in relief. All right, let's spread out. With renewed confidence, the hunters spread out, investigating the giant room. I don't see any magic beasts. Right? Forget magic beasts. I don't even see a single bug. Compared to its well-lit interiors and enormous size, the room of the Statue of God was rather plain. Adorning its walls were countless torches, illuminating the room. In front of the torches stood statues slightly larger than the average man, forming equidistant points of a circle. Beautiful. It's like a work of art. Each statue held something different in its hands. Some held weapons, some books, others held instruments or torches. It's like Mr. Kim started describing decorations in a temple. Mr. Song finished his sentence. Mr. Song found something at his feet. This is a magic circle for? At the center of the temple room, there was a magic circle that he had never seen before in his life. Mr. Song, there's something written here. Can you come take a look at this? A hunter called out to the raid's leader, finding a statue that stood out from the rest. Leaving his observation of the magic circle, Mr. Song headed towards the hunter. One by one, all the hunters in the room gathered before the strange statue as well. Of all the statues in the room, this one was the only one with wings. It was holding a stone tablet. What caught the hunters' eyes were the words written on the stone tablet. It's runic 5. Mr. Song spoke after analyzing the tablet. Runes, a form of text that could be found in dungeons. It was something that could not be found elsewhere on Earth. Only the hunters who awakened 6, as mage class could interpret them. Mr. Song read the first line of the tablet. Commandments of the Curtain and Temple 7. Jin-Woo listened to Mr. Song's reading of the tablet with a serious expression. But then suddenly, someone grabbed his arm. Turning around, he saw Jue looking at him with a pale, fear-stricken face. Notes. 1. statue of God, Shin sang. God Shin plus statue sang. 2, my God, just an not specifically saying that the statue was his God. 3, Statue of Liberty, heel to head height, 111 feet. 4, magic circle, Marbop Jin, magic Marbop plus circle Jin. 5, runic, rune mana, rune, in English, plus text mana. 6, awakened, Gak Sung, terminology used to describe the phenomenon where humans awaken special powers. Those that awaken obtain specific repertoire of abilities and skills fitting to a certain class, fighter, mage, healer, etc. 7, commandments of the Katanan Temple, the Korean word for commandments actually is closer to an uncommon way of saying rule, but I've translated as commandment for a minor story purpose later on. I couldn't find a direct translation for Katanan, so this is just a pronunciation choice. Chapter 3. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Her pale face shocked Jin-Woo. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Over there. Jin-Woo followed Jue's pointing fingers to the statue of God. The enormous statue. She was pointing at its face. Not seeing any difference from the first time he saw it, Jin-Woo tilted his head. With a shaking voice, Jue spoke. His eyes. The statue's eyes just looked at us. What? No matter how long he stared, the results were the same. The statue sat still, unmoving. You must have imagined it. But his words fell on deaf ears. Casting her gaze to the ground, Jue simply held on to his arms and trembled. Wait. A sense of dread washed over Jin-Woo. Where did the sound go? The crackling sound from the torch's fires suddenly became silent. Meanwhile, Mr. Song's reading of the tablet continued. Worship the Lord. 2nd, praise the Lord. 3rd, prove your faith to the Lord. Those who do not follow these commands will not leave alive. It was in that moment, creak. At the sudden sound, all the hunters jumped in surprise. What's happening? The first person to notice was Jin-Woo. Having focused on his hearing because of the torches, he was able to immediately notice what was happening. The door is closing. At his words, the entire party turned towards the door, only to watch it close with a bang. Damn it, I can't do this anymore. The hunter who first voted no to enter the double dungeon swore and headed towards the door. I'm leaving now. You guys can have all the bosses and treasures you want. Glaring rebelliously at Mr. Song, the man turned and grabbed the door's handles. Suddenly, Mr. Song's eyes widened. No, don't. Crunch. A sickening sound of something striking something rang throughout the temple. With it, the man's head had disappeared from sight. Having lost its head, his body naturally fell backwards onto the ground. Thud. The hunters started screaming. Having obliterated the man's head with its mace, the statue returned and assumed its position next to the door as if nothing had happened. That thing just moved. What? Does that mean all the statues here can move? We're supposed to fight those? I didn't even see him swing that mace. It was at this point Jin-Woo replayed Jue's words in his mind. His eyes. The statue's eyes just looked at us. If that's true he shuddered. Making an effort to move his terrified body, he turned and looked at the statue of God. And found the statue of God looking back at him. Jin-Woo realized this was just the beginning. -3. Start of the attack. The statue of God's eyes were lit with a crimson light. Was it a hunter's instinct? No. It was the survival instincts of a living being. Something was coming. Something that could not be stopped. Jin-Woo turned and shouted on top of his lungs. Get down. Right as his mouth opened, a crimson ray of light shot out from the statue's eyes. Jin-Woo threw himself at Jue and pulled her to the ground. Beam. The ray of light passed through where Jin-Woo was standing moments before. 1/10 of a second. No. 1/100th of a second. If the timing of his actions were off by just an infinitesimal amount, the other hunters were not as lucky. The screams did not come from the hunters who were struck by the light. After all, the ones who were struck disintegrated instantly, leaving only a trace of ash and burnt stone in their wake. No. The screams were coming from the hunters who survived. What the hell is this? How could this? The hunters were in shock. 11 remaining alive out of 16. They had never seen an attack like this before. I barely dodged after hearing Jin-Woo. If Mr. Sung didn't shout just now The hunters looked at Jin-Woo and gulped. Their lives' savior. If it was not for him, they knew that they would be counted among the fallen. With his entire body bowed on the ground, Jin-Woo turned his head and peeked at the statue. Its eyes were still lit with crimson glow but did not continue its attack. Is it done attacking? Jin-Woo turned his head towards the ground again. Jue lay below him, shaking in fear. Although she was a B-rank hunter, this was the reason she hunted in simple raids under the association and not an advanced raid under a large guild. Her breathing became more and more irregular. He couldn't just leave her like this. Thinking he had to do something to help her, Jin-Woo began to get up when a strong hand forced him back down. Don't stand up. It was Mr. Song. Although surprised, Jin-Woo sternly listened to his words. Mr. Song shouted at the other hunters as well. Everyone stay where you are. Don't move from your position. After taking a quick look across the party, Mr. Song turned to Jin-Woo again. The ones who were moving got hit. Those that listened to you and got down survived. I see. Mr. Song tilted his head in confusion. Did you not shout after figuring something out? I just felt something dangerous was coming. That's all. Mr. Song's eyes looked at him with bright eyes. His instincts are good. I heard he was an E-rank. If only his abilities were a little higher apostrophe. His gaze turned into one of pity as he continued to stare at Jin-Woo. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo got a better look at the man staring at him. What caught his eyes shocked him. Jesse-1, your arm. It's alright, I can endure this much. But, Jin-Woo gulped. Mr. Song's right arm was draped over Jin-Woo's shoulder, and his other arm was gone. While silently looking at Jue, Mr. Song wordlessly wrapped the remnants of his shirt around the stump where his arm was, gritting his teeth through the pain. Can you tie the end here? Hard to do with just one hand. As Jin-Woo nodded and completed what could barely be called first aid, Mr. Song let out a long sigh. It was a sigh filled with the experience of 10 years of hunting. Looking around, he took in the surroundings and the status of their situation. Just because the statue of God had stopped its attack didn't mean their adversity was over. Time passed as the hunters lay on the ground. Why did this happen to us? Some of the hunters started crying again. We can't stay like this forever. The patience of the survivors was slowly reaching its limits. Jin-Woo felt the same. We can't stay like this forever. But what could they do? If Mr. Song's guess was correct, they would be attacked the moment they started moving. And even if they managed to dodge the statue of God's attack, they still had to go through the statues guarding the door. And therein lied the other problem. The movement of the one guarding the door was so fast that it could barely be seen by the naked eye. How could they get past something like that? It was an impossible situation. The hunter's annihilation was simply a matter of time. Wait, a matter of time? As the thought appeared in his head, an uncomfortable thought followed. Something that no one else had noticed. There's something we missed. Perhaps the answer was there. It was in that moment. Don't move. Mr. Song yelled at Mr. Ju, who responded by baring his teeth. Shut up. We don't know when that thing will attack again. You just want us to wait until that time? Mr. Ju was a fighter class hunter. As beings who threw their bodies into the middle of combat, a fighter class hunter's physical abilities were much greater than an ordinary human. On top of that, Mr. Ju was someone whose skills were acknowledged by a large guild, who had offered him a contract. I can't die like this. With his body still lowered to the ground, Mr. Ju flexed the muscles in his legs. The goal is the door. With an explosive start, Mr. Ju ran towards the door. Watching the man's attempt, Jin-Woo turned away and looked back at the statue of God. As if waiting, the statue was looking at Mr. Ju. A ray of light exploded from its eyes. Beam. The ray covered Mr. Ju's back. One of the female hunters screamed. Unable to control her fear, a yellow puddle slowly appeared from the ground she was collapsed on. The other hunters' faces hardened. Oh my god. No trace of Mr. Ju could be found where he stood, save for 2 feet on the ground, ending just above the ankles. The sound of a man retching reached Jin-Woo's ears, and he furrowed his brows. As expected, this thing was more than capable of annihilating all the hunters in an instant. To it, it was easier than stepping on an insect. So why isn't it? It could kill them all, yet it did not. Compared to the magic beasts that always threw themselves at the hunters, These things were different. Attacking someone only when they moved. Attacking someone only when they neared the door. There was a pattern and condition to their aggression. Like a game with rules. Perhaps there are rules to this room. In that moment, Jin-Woo found a piece of the puzzle in his head. It was the tablet that Mr. Song was reading earlier. Commandments of the Garden Temple. A commandment was a rule, and rules must be followed. If there was a way out of this place, away from these things, the key was written on that tablet. Worship the Lord. Jin-Woo spoke the first commandment out loud. Did you say something? Mr. Song asked, facing Jin-Woo. Instead of answering, Jin-Woo put a finger to his lips. If I'm correct. Slowly, Jin-Woo got up. Mr. Song frantically tried to stop him, but Jin-Woo shook his head at him with a determined face. That's not a face that's given up on living. Mr. Song nodded at Jin-Woo, without looking away from the statue of God. Jin-Woo slowly rose and raised his body gradually higher and higher. Suddenly, the statue of God's gaze fell upon him. Beam. If he hesitated even for a split second on getting back to the ground, Jin-Woo would have lost a lot more than few strands of hair on his head. Back on the ground, Jin-Woo panted heavily. He had almost died just now. When his eyes met the statue of God's, he knew he had looked at death right in the eyes. Having dodged the attack by a hair, literally, Jin-Woo's legs could not stop shaking. But it was not for naught. He's not attacking someone who's moving. Having his body lowered to the ground, no amount of movement caused a reaction from the statue of God. No, his attacks are towards someone who rises above a certain height. To confirm, he had just put his life on the line. And now, he had that confirmation. The meaning of the first commandment. Notes. 1. Arjisi. Arjisi. Korean noun to refer to or describe a middle-aged man. Japanese equivalent equals ojisn. Chapter 4. This chapter is updated by novels.pl-4. The Three Commandments. Jin-Woo shouted towards the other hunters. Everyone. They turned their heads toward his voice. You have to bow before the statue of God. The hunters tilted their heads in confusion. Bow? Bow to that thing? The hunters who were looking at each other started cursing at Jin-Woo. Fook. What the hell are you saying? Is this a situation where you could say something like that? Have you gone crazy? Sung Jin-Woo. Mr. Kim flared his nostrils. Looks like I judged you wrong. If I could get up from this spot, I'd sock you right in the nose. Jin-Woo bit his lips. After all, 6 of their comrades had fallen to the statue of God. To think that he'd ask the others to bow before it understandably invited their ire. More importantly, there was no solid proof to his guesses. Only a gut feeling. One could not easily explain nor put to words what they felt through instinct. While he was lost for words, someone spoke up. I'll do it. The voice came from behind Jin-Woo. The hunter's eyes turned toward the raid leader who had spoken. Mr. Song, you're going to bow before that Godom statue. As the hunters spoke out in confusion, Mr. Song turned and met Jin-Woo's eyes. What have you discovered? Jin-Woo shook his head. Just a gut feeling? Yes, for now. I see. Jin-Woo's instincts resulted in 11 of them being still alive. Well, 10 after Mr. Ju's death. As such, was it not worth it to try and put some faith in him? This was what Mr. Song believed. As the raid leader bowed before the statue of God, the mood in the air became somber. You're really going to do it? Taking advantage of the opportunity Mr. Song had provided, Jin-Woo spoke up. Please bow before the statue of God. This might be our only way to leave here alive. Alive. To leave here alive. That phrase reached the others' ears with a great weight. Leave here alive? We can get out of here, just by bowing before that thing? One by one, the hesitant hunters started bowing before the statue, imitating a scene of worship. Eventually, even the angry Mr. Kim also took his place bowing before the statue. However, there was no response from the statue of God. Its 2 eyes still glowed with the terrifying crimson light. Jin-Woo felt his heart sinking to his stomach. Was I wrong? And his gaze turned to Jue at his side, lying completely prone on the ground with her hands covering her head. It was hard to say that she was in a position of bowing before the statue. Jin-Woo gently grabbed Jue's wrists. Startled, Jue looked up at him like a terrified prey. He wordlessly nodded at her, then released his hand. Slowly, Jin-Woo helped Jue assume the position of worship before the statue of God. This should do it. And then there was one himself. Jin-Woo faced the statue, kneeling, then put his hands on the ground and slowly bowed his head. And a change occurred. Oh, ooh. The hunters who noticed started making noise. The statue of God. Everyone, look at the statue of God. Its eyes. The crimson light that adorned the statue's eyes were fading away. What? You mean this really is working? And just like that, the lights completely disappeared from the statue's eyes. The hunters cheered in unison. The light disappeared. We're alive. The excited hunters rose from their spots and cheered, but the statue of God did not react. Jin-Woo, who followed suit, sighed with relief. Phew. As he had guessed, this room was operating accordingly to a set of rules and conditions, just like a game. If that's true, the game was not over yet. There were 2 more commandments. Second, praise the Lord. Third, prove your faith. Suddenly, with a deep rumbling, the entire room started to shake. Jin-Woo's expression hardened. As I thought apostrophe. His guesses were correct. This was not over. The statue of God's enormous body was slowly rising from its seat. The hunters who were celebrating together with tears of joy froze. What? Wasn't it all over? No, it can't be. Frozen in fear, the hunters could not say much more. Their faces were filled with terror and despair. No. The statue of God assumed a standing position. It looked around, taking in the surrounding, then started walking towards the hunters. Boom. With each step it took, the statue of God shook the earth. Boom. Its massive figure was such that its head almost reached the ceiling. Boom. As its sheer size put pressure on the hunters, it slowly closed the gap between it and them. Hey, Mr. Sung Jin-Woo, what should we do? The hunters who were cursing Jin-Woo only moments ago now looked towards him for hope. Is there anything else we have to do? Say something. Even as grown adults, the hunters' faces were on the verge of breaking down in tears. Yet they looked at Jin-Woo as their only remaining hope. Jin-Woo carefully helped Jue, frozen in fear, to her feet, and he explained the second commandment. It said, praise the Lord. That's our clue. That's. Mr. Kim spoke knowingly. It was written on the tablet, right? That's right. Praise the Lord, prove your faith. We have to fulfill all 3 commandments. Jin-Woo's words were filled with urgency. Boom. With one last step, the statue of God had already arrived before their group. Its massive shadows covered the hunters, whose faces became pale. I'll try. One of the hunters, normally a shy, youthful man, stepped forward. Hey. What are you going to try? I'm part of my church's choir. If it's praise, I'm confident in it. The young man answered Mr. Kim and walked towards the statue of God. As he neared the statue, he took a deep breath and started singing. As I walk to the Lord, his youthful voice rang throughout the room. Please renew me and provide me with your blessing. The statue of God stopped before him. The hunters gasped in surprise and awe. As if it was satisfied by the song, the statue of God stood motionless. All other sounds of the room disappeared. Only the youth's voice was heard in the room. Gaining courage from the apparent result, the hunter strengthened his voice and continued to sing. All my weaknesses will be washed away by the grace of my Lord. Amidst the hopeful hunters, Jin-Woo could not shake the feeling of uneasiness, the feeling that they were missing something. No, this is all wrong. He kept repeating the thought to himself. This room had its own set of rules. Right now, the youthful hunter was following the rule of Christianity, not this room. But thankfully, the statue of God was not moving. Maybe this was enough to satisfy the conditions. Jin-Woo tilted his head. The reason why he had not stopped the singing was because he could not think of any other way to stop the statue of God. Suddenly, boom, a loud crash broke through the singing, followed by a scream. As the statue of God raised its foot again, the mangled remains of the singing hunter fell from its soul. The other hunters started screaming as well. The previously emotionless face of the statue of God was now filled with an incredible rage. It's angry. Run. The hunters quickly ran away from the statue. Having lost all thought and reason after seeing the youthful man be crushed beneath the statue of God's foot, a female hunter simply stood in place and screamed. Cheat. Jin-Woo, who was running with Jue in his arms, quickly turned to try and help her, but he was blocked by Mr. Song. You see, it's too late. Like swatting a fly, the statue of God slammed its hand on top of the female hunter. Bang! Jin-Woo turned away. It was a gruesome scene which he could not bear to witness. We can't dilly-dally here. Are you trying to get that young lady killed as well? At Mr. Song's rebuke, Jin-Woo snapped back to attention. Mr. Song was right. Boom. You work. Boom. Boom. Help me. No longer walking, the statue of God ran from hunter to hunter, crushing them beneath his feet. With each step, he shook the entire temple. Boom. Boom. Jin-Woo ran with his teeth clenched. With her eyes closed, Jue held on to Jin-Woo as they ran. Let's split apart. Okay. Knowing that running together made them a better target, Jin-Woo and Mr. Song separated away from each other. Trying to maintain the largest distance between himself and the statue of God, Jin-Woo ran towards a spot at the walls. He saw that Mr. Park was already there, having ran with all his might, knowing there was more on the line to him than just his own life. The image of his family reflected over his teary eyes. His son, who looked just like his father. His wife, with his second child. Mr. Park could not afford to die in a place like this. Pulling forth every ounce of his strength, Mr. Park was able to reach the walls faster than the other hunters. Huff, huff. Suddenly, Mr. Kim, who was friends with the man, shouted at the panting Mr. Park. Mr. Park. At the familiar voice, Mr. Park turned towards Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim gestured towards Mr. Park's back and yelled, "Turn around," and something sharp flashed from behind Mr. Park. Mr. Park was split cleanly from the top of his head to the base of his crotch. The evenly separated sides of his body fell in different directions onto the ground. Mr. Park. The statue that had cleaved Mr. Park in twain with its sword simply returned and assumed its position on the walls, as if nothing had happened. Mr. Kim held back tears as he witnessed the death of his friend. These fucking pieces of boom, boom, boom. Behind him, the giant statue of God was going from hunter to hunter, crushing them with his feet. Those that fled to the walls were attacked by the statues. Ah, my arm, my arm. The interior of the temple had turned into a scene of terror and carnage. Jin-Woo panted wildly as he ran, his forehead dripping with cold sweat, his legs getting heavier and heavier, his breath getting shallower and shallower. But his head was filled with a single thought, repeated over and over again. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. The second commandment that swam through his head. The key to solving the meaning of the commandments must be hidden in this room. There must be something in here that we're supposed to use. But when the hunters initially entered the temple and looked around, they found no tools or mechanisms. The only thing here are those damned statues. Wait. A thought appeared in Jin-Woo's head. The only thing that's here are those statues? Jin-Woo's eyes widened. Why didn't I think of that? If the statues were the only thing in this room, then the statues must be the key to solving the mystery. The statues only moved when someone entered their proximity. This must have been the key to using them somehow. If that's correct. Gathering what energy he had left, Jin-Woo screamed through his panting breath. Everyone, head to the statues with instruments. Chapter 5. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Jin-Woo's shout reached all the hunters' ears. Instruments. Hope returned to their eyes. Unlike the time where Jin-Woo asked them to bow, the hunters this time did not hesitate to respond. Of course, if Jin-Woo was wrong on his guess, they would be massacred when they approached the statues. But in this moment, there was not one hunter who remained suspicious of Jin-Woo's directions. Mr. Song was the first to arrive at a statue holding an instrument. Holding his breath, Mr. Song slowly looked up at the statue. As if responding, the statue's fingers moved, and it started playing the harp in its hands. It was a beautiful sound. He was right. Move to the statues with instruments. Each hunter, with renewed hope, ran towards the various statues holding instruments, trumpets, flutes, lyres. Soon, the harmonious melody of different instruments filled the entire temple. Mr. Kim, who had been running until his breath ran out, collapsed and knelt before a statue holding a mandolin. Strum strum. As the mandolin's melody rang through the air, the statue of God that was chasing Mr. Kim slowed to a stop. Unable to hold his emotions back, Mr. Kim burst into tears where he knelt. And the statue of God turned away from him. Scanning the rest of the temple, it found its new target. Meeting its eyes, Jin-Woo cursed. And he started running, his heart beating like it was about to explode. His sweating back was soaked. Why is this one not playing? Jin-Woo glared at the statue he had arrived at with resentment. Holding drums in its hands, its silent figure made no indication that it would play its instrument. Boom, boom, boom. With terrifying speed, the statue of God closed the gap between them. As the statue, which had been at the opposite end of the room only moments ago, neared them, Jin-Woo gulped. Is it because Jue and I are both here at the same time? That must have been the answer. As he looked around, no other hunter had trouble with their statues. I don't have time to think about this. He put down Jue and prepared to run to a different spot. Jin-Woo, a terrified Jue, held onto his sleeves. Jin-Woo calmly whispered into her ears, "We'll both die if I stay." As he saw tears forming at the corners of her eyes, Jin-Woo knew that there was no time to explain. He gently pulled away her shaking hands from his sleeves, then ran with all his might towards another statue. Ba-bum ba-bum ba-bum. He heard the beat of the drums starting from behind him as he ran. Thank God. There was only one thing left, to safely make it to another statue. Jin-Woo was now the only one who had not made it to the protection of statues holding instruments. Accordingly, the complete rage of the statue of God was now focused solely on him. Jin-Woo ran away from the crashing footsteps of his chaser and sped across the room. Boom, boom. As he barely dodged and rolled away from the statue's stomps, his panting became heavier and heavier. Although he was the lowest of the E-rank hunters, as a fighter class hunter, his body offered what little help it could in this situation. Just a little bit more. Taking notice of the statue of God's footsteps closing in on him, he focused and strengthened his legs. His speed increased. There was but a few steps until he reached his target statue. No, not that way. Mr. Song had shouted at him. Having focused on the statue of God's movements until now, Jin-Woo turned his attention to the statue he had arrived at. It's not holding an instrument. He now realized what appeared to be an instrument in the statue's hands was actually a shield. Without mercy, the statue raised and brought down the shield in its hands. Jin-Woo threw his body to the side. Jue screamed. As he rolled across on the floor, he looked up. The statue of God was almost upon him. Out of the frying pan. His tumble on the ground had opened a cut on his forehead. Blood flowed down to his eyes, obscuring his vision. Jin-Woo rapidly looked left and right. Instrument apostrophe, but no instrument registered in his eyes. The statue of God raised its foot. Boom. Jin-Woo barely evaded the stomp by throwing his body to the side, but he was reaching his limits. Feeling faint, he found it hard to maintain balance for some reason. Please apostrophe. If there was a god, he wanted to pray to it. In that moment, Jin-Woo noticed a statue that was neither holding a weapon nor an instrument. He crawled with last vestiges of his strength, placing his hopes on the statue. With a final twist of his body, he threw himself at the feet of the statue with a book in its hands. Facing the statue of God that was heading toward him, he realized he had no strength left to move. Panting heavily, he looked at the face of the statue of God. As if made worse by his persistent resistance, the anger in the face that looked down upon Jin-Woo was greatly magnified. It stopped before Jin-Woo. Faced with a giant as tall as a building, Jin-Woo struggled to breathe. Guess I'm a cornered rat apostrophe. The statue of God simply continued to stare. This is the end apostrophe. Certain of his impending doom, Jin-Woo saw his death in the eyes that were looking down at him. In that moment, he heard a beautiful and melodious singing coming from behind him. With effort, he turned and looked at its source. The statue that he was resting on was now singing with a holy voice, its sound echoing throughout the temple. Looking back, Jin-Woo saw the statue of God's face starting to relax. The traces of its demonic rage disappeared as the statue's face returned to its originally motionless visage. As the statue's music ended, the statue of God turned and returned to its seat, appearing as if nothing had happened. Boom! The sound of the giant sitting down rang throughout the temple. Ha! Are we safe? Jin-Woo faintly smiled through his heavy breaths. Jue quickly ran to him. Jin-Woo, having reached him after running with all her might, Jue collapsed next to him in tears. Oh my god, oh my god. She used all the magic power at her disposal and tried every healing magic she knew. But it had no effect. One by one, the scattered hunters gathered before Jin-Woo, their expressions equally dark. Oh no. Jin-Woo, amidst their pitying looks and words, Jue cried without ceasing. Why are they looking at me like that? Jin-Woo wanted to ask, but he lacked the energy to speak. So, he tried to gather his strength and stand up. A pool of blood had gathered where he was sitting. Jin-Woo finally was able to understand the situation he was in. His right leg had disappeared below the knees. He looked across the room to the statue holding a shield. The base of the shield was covered in blood. His missing leg below it. He turned and saw blood dripping down from Jue's nose. Her body had reached its limits. AB rank hunter's healing was insufficient for the regeneration of a body part. Yet she continued, her efforts like collecting water with a broken pitcher. And as she continued, both her magic power and vitality quickly decreased. It's okay, Jue. You can stop now. No, I can heal this. I'll heal you. The hunters watched the pair with pity. Of the 17 that had entered, only 6 remained. Of the 6 remaining, 2 had received a seriously injury. Mr. Sung and his arm, and now Jin-Woo with his leg. Although their lives were saved, no one could put on a smile. Suddenly, a thundering noise rang throughout the temple. At its center, the ground with the magic circle inscribed upon it started rising, forming a platform. Jin-Woo realized the final trial had arrived. Prove your faith apostrophe. He had already been contemplating its meaning. -5. The final trial. The rising ground stopped at waist height. An altar. Jin-Woo absent-mindedly spoke to himself. An altar? Did he just say an altar? The man who had saved their lives not once but twice. Jin-Woo was not a high-leveled awakened being one, but a lowly E-rank hunter that they looked down on in the past. If it wasn't for Mr. Sung, we would be apostrophe. The hunter's thoughts were in union. Jin-Woo's words up until now were a lifeline to them. And now this man had uttered the words, altar. The quick-witted Mr. Kim was the first to speak. I think I understand. He unsheathed the sword at his waist. Normally a weapon to be used in slaying magic beasts, its purpose this time was different. Even an idiot like me can understand what you mean by altar. The hunters looked at Mr. Kim's drawn sword, gleaming with sharpness, and gulped. Hey, Mr. Kim. Why are you taking that out now? Let's talk about this. Talk. Mr. Song's C rank was the highest in the party. With him out of commission, there was no one else in the party would could match Mr. Kim, whose skill shone even amongst the other D rankers. Mr. Kim pointed his sword at the altar. The last commandment was, prove your faith. And now this altar appeared in the middle of the room. Mr. Kim's gaze shifted to Jin-Woo. We have to sacrifice someone at the altar, right, Mr. Sung? Jin-Woo nodded. It was his guess as well. One of the living 6 had to become a sacrifice. That's probably the last rule apostrophe. As he raised his head, he saw Mr. Kim approaching him with a strange look in his eyes. A streak of sweat fell down the side of Jin-Woo's head. Jesse, what are you going to? Just sit there quietly. Mr. Kim pointed his sword at Mr. Song, who had been sitting next to Jin-Woo looking over his injuries. Who is the one who dragged us all here? It's Mr. Song right here. Then shouldn't he be the one to pay the price for all this? Jesse. Jin-Woo yelled and tried to get up, but Mr. Song's hands stopped him. Jin-Woo turned and looked at the man. Mr. Song shook his head without a word. His eyes begged Jin-Woo to stay quiet. Jin-Woo wanted to say something, but swallowed his words. Mr. Song slowly got up. Mr. Kim is right. I have to take responsibility. Then we're in agreement, old man. Mr. Kim gestured towards the altar with his sword. If you're in, then let's hurry up. 11 people died because of you. Notes. 1. Awakening being, Gaksunga. To awaken Gaksung plus person, a person who had underwent awakening. All hunters are awakened beings. Not all awakened beings work as hunters. Chapter 6. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. One of the casualties included Mr. Park, Mr. Kim's friend. Of course, the party had voted on the issue before entering the double dungeon, with a stipulation that no one would argue the result. But to Mr. Kim, who had lost all reason, it was but a faded memory in the back of his mind. I'll go of my own will, So could you put away the sword? Mr. Song asked Mr. Kim. How could I trust you after all this? Stop talking and walk. Sighing, Mr. Song walked to the altar, followed by Mr. Kim, and his sword pointed at his back. As he watched, Jin-Woo bit his lips. It's not Mr. Song's fault apostrophe. After all, they all had voted and agreed on the result. To Jin-Woo, after everything they went through, putting all the blame on Mr. Song was the height of cowardice. But apostrophe, Jin-Woo simply did not have the power to stop Mr. Kim, a D ranker who stood at the height of his rank, and an E ranker who groveled at the lowest of his. The difference in power was too much. On top of that, he was missing one of his legs. If he tried something now, not only him, but Jue, who was healing him, could become the target of Mr. Kim's anger. Cheat. Jin-Woo closed his eyes. Out of all the days, he cursed his powerlessness the most in this moment. In the meantime, Mr. Song had gotten on top of the altar. Whoosh. In response, a red flame appeared at the edges of the middle area where the altar was. All those gathered gulped as they cautiously prepared for what would happen next. But nothing happened, except for the appearance of the flame. As no new development occurred after some time, Mr. Kim and the others started feeling anxious. Hey, Mr. Sung. Wasn't this it? Mr. Kim asked Jin-Woo. I'm not sure. Jin-Woo had expected the third commandment to be fulfilled when a person went on top of the altar. Was it not asking for a sacrifice? Well, it was not a bad news to Jin-Woo. If his theory of sacrifice was wrong, then there was a chance to save Mr. Song. Jin-Woo's face brightened. As he struggled to get up, Jin-Woo asked the two hunters standing nearby for help. Could you help me get to the altar? Jin-Woo, your injury. Jue also stood up with Jin-Woo. Having spent most of her mana, her appearance was pale and weak. Thanks to her help, Jin-Woo was at least able to overcome the sense of pain from his injuries. I have to hurry. Jue's condition, Mr. Kim's anger, the other hunter's terror. He was running out of time. With the other two hunters' assistance, Jin-Woo arrived at the altar. Let's go up on the altar. His two helpers were taken back for a moment, but placed their faith in Jin-Woo and got on top of the altar. In response, 3 more flames arose from the edge of the middle area. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Jin-Woo's eyes widened. Same as the number of people on top. Mr. Song, his two helpers and himself. The 4 flames flickered around the middle area, outlining a circle. Looking at their placement, we just need 2 more to complete the circle. And so, it appeared that the remaining people would have to come on top of the altar. Do you think someone will come to rescue us if we wait? Jin-Woo asked Mr. Song. Mr. Song shook his head. Today marks the 7th day since this gate opened. Before reinforcements arrive, those things will probably move first. For a D-rank gate, they sure left it alone for too long. Well, it's the association. After all, a gate will undergo a full opening after 7 days. It was the job of the hunter to prevent that from happening. To close the gate by slaying the boss in the dungeon, that was the real objective of a raid. Should they fail to do so in time, all the magic beasts within the dungeon obtained the freedom to exit the gate. A dungeon break. Jin-Woo looked around him. The statue of God remained in its seat, looking down upon their party from distance. If that thing is allowed to leave here apostrophe, he could not imagine the destruction that would follow. Of course, their party would be the first to be massacred, if the statues in the room gained the freedom to move about. So Jin-Woo realized they could not just hold out for help. Jin-Woo called out to Jue and Mr. Kim. Can you two also come up here? Jue followed his instructions. Even the hesitating Mr. Kim quickly followed suit. 2 more flames appeared, completing the circle. Whoosh. The hunters gasped. Huh? What's happening? As Jin-Woo expected, something was happening. It's coming. From the outermost circle of the middle area, small blue flames started appearing. One by one, they flared into existence and formed a circle around the middle area. 34, 35, 36 apostrophe. Jin-Woo counted 36 blue flames. The red flames that matched the number of people. The blue flames that number 36. Is there a meaning to their number? In that moment, creak. The door blocking their exit opened without a warning. The hunters flinched in reaction. Ugh. Every single one of them wanted to run towards the exit, but the memory of the final moments of the singing hunter remained fresh in their minds. and no one made any movements. They did not know what fate would await the first person to leave the altar. As if waiting for an answer, all their gazes fell upon Jin-Woo, who closed his mouth in silence. It was too early to make a conclusion, whether or not the opening of the door was a trap, or if it was the dungeon's way of letting them know that they had fulfilled the final commandment. He did not know. As the hunters waited for Jin-Woo's directions, noises that carried bad news came from edges of the room. Grinned, sled. The 6 heads turned in unison, looking around the room. What the hell? They've come closer. They're all just moved. The hunters' breathing quickened. The statues that only responded to humans being nearby suddenly appeared to be few steps closer than before. In that short time, Jin-Woo was able to fully ascertain the situation. No, the statues didn't move. It was the pedestals beneath the statues that moved closer. The sliding sound from earlier was the sound of stone pedestals grinding against the floor. They've stopped moving. Mr. Kim wiped away the sweat on his brows. As everyone else's attentions were focused on the statues, Jin-Woo looked at the blue flames around them. Disappearing one by one, 3 blue flames had already gone out. Grinned, sled. What? What? Where is it? Someone shouted. Jin-Woo raised his head. The sound came from his direction. The statues that faced him had moved closer. Why only me? Was it because he had looked away? Jin-Woo closed his eyes to test the theory. Grind. Slide. Goddamn it. Why? What do we do now? With renewed understanding, Jin-Woo shouted at the others. Don't look away from the statues. Now that he thought about it, the initial movements of the pedestals were probably caused when everyone looked towards him for guidance earlier. These bastards don't move when we're looking at them. Another blue flame went out, but it did not elicit a response from the statues. Could it be? Without taking his eyes off the statues, Jin-Woo carefully raised his arm and looked at his watch. As I thought, the blue flames were disappearing every minute. The blue flames are a timer. Jin-Woo surmised that the final commandment's trial was to wait on top of the altar until the 36 blue flames disappeared. As long as each of them covered all the statues, they would be safe. There was a chance no one had to die in this final trial. Jin-Woo checked his watch and the blue flames to determine the time remaining. 30 left apostrophe. They just had to wait for 30 minutes. But Jin-Woo had made a mistake. While he was counting the blue flames, he had looked away from the statues, and as such, they started moving toward him again. Grind. Slide. I can't do this. The man who was positioned across Jin-Woo screamed and ran towards the open door. Having startled by the sound of movement coming from behind him, unable to turn around, the man lost all courage and made the decision to run. As he jumped from the altar, one of the red flames disappeared. No. Don't, Jin-Woo shouted. But the man who ran with all his might ignored him and safely passed through the open doors. What? Mr. Sung, what just happened? He got out safely. Jin-Woo, unable to turn around towards the door, did not know what had happened. Did anything change? The door moved slightly inwards. Is it closing right now? No. Number. It started closing a little after that man went through but isn't moving anymore. Jin-Woo remembered the red flame disappearing after the man left the altar. Of course. His heart sank to his stomach. The riddle that plagued his mind atop the altar had finally revealed its answer. What part of this was proving faith to the Lord? The answer had come to him. However, to a man who could only walk with someone else's assistance, it was the worst answer possible. The open door was a trap, a false help to their eyes. Had the entire party ran towards the exit after seeing the door open, the door would have closed immediately and the party would have ran towards their massacre. On the contrary, the altar was the safe zone. If they had just waited on top and waited out the blue flames while watching the statues, it would have guaranteed their safety. A false hope they could see versus a promise they could not. This was how one proved their faith to the Lord. It was a test to overcome the temptation of freedom amidst the approaching danger. Here, 2 variables appeared before their situation. 1. Jin-Woo's presence. Instead of running to the open door to their doom, the party stopped to listen to Jin-Woo, avoiding a certain death. We got lucky. It was only possible due to the presence of a man who had solved the 2 commandments before and saved their lives, earning their respect and attention in the process. But the second variable was not as favorable. Someone had left their party to safety. How would those that remained behind react to this appearance of hope? The answer was obvious. The man supporting Jin-Woo was the second to run out the open doors. Mr. Song quickly reacted and caught the falling Jin-Woo. Another red flame went out with the second runner, and the door inched closer to being shut. Hey, hey! Mr. Kim wagged his finger at the second runner, but the man, like the first, safely passed through the doors. Looking at the number of remaining flames, Jin-Woo shouted, "Please don't move. We can't afford to lose anyone else." Chapter 7. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Front, back, left, right. To cover the 4 cardinal directions, a minimum of 4 people were needed. Jin-Woo, Jue, Mr. Song and Mr. Kim. If even one more person left amongst the remaining 4, a gap would open up in their coverage. Mr. Sung, what's happening? Please explain. Mr. Kim asked while wiping away the sweat on his forehead. We just have to wait like this, until all of the blue flames disappear. Jin-Woo revealed all that he had surmised. Mr. Kim listened with attention and nodded along. Finishing his explanation, Jin-Woo added, "We can all survive this." The rules of this room always opened a path to survival for those that followed it. The last rule should be no different. As long as they believed in each other, everyone could leave without being hurt. This was Jin-Woo's conclusion. Mr. Kim's thoughts were different. He asked after hesitating, "Mr. Sung, you might be correct on all this, but isn't there a possibility that the door might just close once the timer ends?" Jin-Woo could not answer him. Although his theory was gathered from the multiple trials and the evidence observed so far, it was not 100% guaranteed that he was correct, and Mr. Kim needed an assurance. To him, the certainty of his own survival outweighed the uncertain survival of the entire group. "I'm sorry. I don't think I can do this. Jesse. I'm sorry." And with that, Mr. Kim stepped off of the altar. Ignoring Jin-Woo's voice, he ran towards the door. After taking one last look at the people he left behind, Mr. Kim went through the door and did not come back. Jin-Woo clenched and grinded his teeth. Fook. He had saved their lives. Instead of repaying his actions with kindness and gratitude, they betrayed him. As expected, a hole appeared in their coverage of the statues. Gray and slide. The statues inched closer and closer towards the group. After looking at their surroundings, Mr. Song spoke to Jin-Woo and Jue. "You guys should go." It was a voice filled with resignation. Jin-Woo turned his head and looked at the man. Jesse. Mr. Kim was right. Who was it that brought you all here? It's only right that I remain behind. But, if anyone should live, it's you youngins with your many years of life remaining. Mr. Song smiled. They were words meant to comfort the 2 that would have to leave him behind. Jin-Woo nodded in defeat. His heart was heavy, but they were not in a situation where they could argue on who should stay and who should go. "Miss Jue, could you please take Jin-Woo?" "Okay." But suddenly, Jue, who was approaching the 2 men, collapsed onto the ground. Struggling to get up. Tears filled her eyes. I can't move my legs." Jin-Woo and Mr. Song's expressions darkened. She was not in a good state. Her lips had turned blue, and her entire body was spasming lightly. It was the side effect of overusing one's mana to near emptiness, made worse in her exhausted state. "Only because she tried to heal my leg." Jin-Woo struggled to speak as the guilt weighed heavily upon his heart. But this was not a time to waste away like this. Gray and slide. The statues were continuing to move towards the center of the room. Jin-Woo pulled away from Mr. Song's arms and collapsed onto the floor of the altar. Mr. Song's eyes widened. "You." Jin-Woo spoke to him with a determined look. Jesse, please take Jue and get out of here." "I told you, I would remain." "Then who will take Jue?" Jin-Woo wasn't able to walk on his own. It was impossible for him to take Jue, also incapacitated, to the doors. Of course, there was the option of leaving her behind. But she was someone who had saved his life countless times before. And even her current state was due to spending all her mana in efforts to heal him. He hated the thought of carrying the guilt of leaving such a person behind for the rest of his life. "There's no time. Please go." Mr. Song picked up Jue with a heavy expression. Jue cried and shook her head in defiance. "No, we can't." "Jin-Woo, you can leave. I'll stay behind." "I promised to buy you dinner. right? Jin-Woo took out the E-rank magic core from his pocket and placed it in Jue's hand. Go ahead first and eat with this. I'll come collect the change later. Jue flared at his smile. How could you even joke in a time like this? Jin-Woo nodded toward Mr. Song, who struck the back of Jue's neck, knocking her out. Mr. Song carried her over his right shoulder. I'm sorry. It's my decision, after all. Mr. Song bowed his head toward Jin-Woo, and stepped down from the altar with Jue. The statues were quickly nearing the altar. Sitting down, Jin-Woo took in a deep breath. Noticing the sword that Mr. Kim had left behind, he reached out and grabbed it. Now that it's like this, I'm going to take at least one of you with me. Turning around, he saw Mr. Song and Jue safely make it through the open doors. Thank God, I'm the only one that'll die now. It was not a sentiment born of some noble self-sacrifice, just a matter of simple calculation. Even if he got out somehow, he would have to live the rest of his life as a cripple. Forget being a hunter, it wouldn't be possible for him to even live a normal life. With no special talents or learned skills, he did not see a happy life ahead of him. Then there's mother's hospital bills and Jinna's education expenses apostrophe. Since there was no way he'd be able to support them with this injury, he thought to at least provide for them through his death. Let's see. The compensation for death during a raid was 300 million won to the surviving family, or was it 400 million? Compared to the worthless life of an E-ranker, it was a rather generous compensation. Gray and Slide, stop. They were here. The first statue to arrive took a step towards the altar. Jin-Woo looked towards him and raised his sword. Come. But the first attack came from behind. Stab. The spear that pierced his back now protruded out of his chest. Cough. Jin-Woo threw up a large amount of blood. The pain assaulted his senses like hail. If the place you were stabbed in was just a bit higher, it would have pierced your heart. Jue's words from earlier flashed across his mind. Woo Yuak. The statue raised its spear and with it, Jin-Woo still skewered to the weapon. Jin-Woo found himself suspended in air. As he flailed his legs in pain, the statue slammed him towards the ground. Bang! Crack crack crack. He heard the sound of bones breaking throughout his entire body. There was nowhere he did not feel pain. One by one, the statues gathered around the convulsing Jin-Woo, who glared up at them. I don't want to die like this apostrophe. As death crept closer and closer, tears formed in his eyes. His family appeared in his mind. Jue, who worried for him until the last minute, also appeared in his mind. I don't want to die apostrophe. To end his life at a young age of 24. Step. A statue wielding a sword walked towards him with an expressionless face. Even as his entire body shook, Jin-Woo did not look away from its gaze. Finally, the statue's raised sword fell down towards him. Just one more. If I had just one more chance. Jin-Woo's eyes widened at the falling sword. It was in that moment. Tick 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 tick. As if someone had pressed the pause button on a video, the falling sword stopped before his eyes. No, not stopped. Slowed to a crawl, almost as if it was stopped. Millimeter by millimeter, the sword was definitely still coming down at him. What? He could not hide his surprise. Then, a female voice he had never heard before in his life rang throughout his head. You have fulfilled all conditions of the secret quest. The weak one's courage. Secret quest. Fulfilled all conditions? He had no idea what it was saying. No, before that, where is that voice coming from? Ignoring his thoughts, the voice continued. You've obtained the right to become a player. Do you accept? Obtained the right? Accept. It sounds like it's giving me something apostrophe. Growing up in poverty, he knew there was no such thing as free in life. But I supposed that was in life. What does any of it matter in death? As he waited in hesitation, the voice in his head asked again. You do not have much allowed time remaining. In the case the right is refused, your heart will stop in 0.02 seconds. Do you accept? Whether or not this was a hallucination, one thing was certain, his impending death. On top of the sword slowly coming down on his head, the other statues' weapons were also finding their way towards him. At this point, Jin-Woo gave himself up to resignation. Apostrophe sure, why not? He did not speak the words out loud, merely thought them in his head. But the voice answered his thoughts. Welcome to becoming a player. Flash. A blinding light surrounded his body, and Jin-Woo lost consciousness. -6. penalty. He opened his eyes. A bright white ceiling. The stinging smell of disinfectant. Feeling of a hard bed behind his back. Jin-Woo immediately realized where he had opened his eyes. A hospital? Although he found himself coming less and less after meeting the B-rank healer class hunter Jue, the hospital was still a place Jin-Woo could call a second home in his job. After all, there were even rumors that there was a room reserved just for him here. Jin-Woo sat upright. Holding his hand up to his chest, he felt the regular beating of his heart. I'm alive, not just alive. His entire body felt lighter than usual. Compared to the heaviness he felt when he would normally open his eyes here, something was different. It was as if he woke up after a good rest in his own home. What? When he remembered the scene before he passed out, it was an unthinkable occurrence. The falling sword. The statues that surrounded him. Even if he had somehow dodged the sword, it would take a party composed of A-rank, no, S-rank hunters to defeat the enemies in that room. And I came out of there alive? Was it a dream? Thankfully, there was an easy way to find out. Jin-Woo looked underneath the blanket covering him. If it was all real, he would be missing a leg. Then, a deep voice interrupted him. Have you regained consciousness? Chapter 8. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Startled by the deep voice that spoke to him from a corner, Jin-Woo straightened his back and turned his head towards the source. I apologize if I've surprised you. Unfortunately, we can't afford to delay here any longer. Two men, dressed in black suits, walked towards the bed. Jin-Woo tilted his head and asked, May I ask who you are? He did not recognize their faces. One of the men, sporting a military-esque short hair, handed him a business card. This is where we're from. Jin-Woo read the card he received. Korean Hunter Association, Hunter Surveillance Department 1, Section Chief Woo Jin-Keol. Of all the departments of the Hunter Association, the Hunter Surveillance Department, HSD, was the only one composed of strong hunters. As the department in charge of monitoring and keeping the hunters in line, it made sense that it would be filled with high-level hunters. What does the Hunter Surveillance Department want with me? Woo Jin-Keol pulled up a chair and sat down. The other man who appeared to be his junior stood behind him. With the two men's imposing physique close before him, Jin-Woo felt a great deal of pressure. They began explaining the situation. As he listened to their words, Jin-Woo uttered in surprise, I was asleep for 4 days? Do you by any chance remember anything before you lost consciousness? I think so. Could you please tell us your recollection? Leaving aside the detail regarding the mysterious voice, he recalled everything he went through until his passing out. And so that's when you lost consciousness, is that correct? Yes. When I opened my eyes, I was here. Woo Jin-Keol and his junior exchanged glances. Since the victim of the incident did not appear to know anything, they were at a loss regarding the situation. Of course, the one who wanted to know what happened the most was Jin-Woo. How did I end up here? Did a large guild take care of those things? That's Woo Jin-Keol explained awkwardly. After being contacted by the survivors, the Hunter Surveillance Department and Baekho Guild arrived at the scene of the incident, only to find, with a large member count, Baekho Guild was one of the top 5 guilds of Korea. If they were pulled into the situation by the association, it meant the association had recognized the magnitude of the danger. Jin-Woo gulped. Just what had happened there? To find nothing. Everything had disappeared. No traces of any statues or that statue of God. Only the unconscious hunter Sung Jin-Woo lying in the middle of the room. What? Jin-Woo's expression was one of disbelief. We couldn't believe it either. If there were any gaps or disconnects between the survivors' statements, or if we hadn't found the remains of the other victims, we might have suspected some other possibility. Woo Jin-Keol scratched his chin. It had been 6 years since he awakened as an A-ranker and started working in the HSD. He felt like he had seen everything since then, but this was the first time he had come across something like this. Even after reaching out to other guilds and contacting foreign agencies, no one had ever heard of what the survivors described. And that's why, it's just a theory at the moment. Woo Jin-Keol carefully started. It's undeniable that there were dangerous entities in that room, but someone or some people had taken care of them all. Until the gate closed, no otherworldly existences came out of it. They had to consider all possibilities, no matter how unlikely. After much deliberation, The association had come to a possible answer. Woo Jin-Kyol looked at Jin-Woo and continued. We believe that there is a possibility Hunter Sung Jin-Woo may have undergone a second awakening. 2. A second awakening. Jin-Woo's eyes widened. It was a rare event, one where a person who had awakened underwent another awakening, more commonly known as reawakening. 3. Nearly all the hunters that awakened again after their first awakening received an incredible amount of power. Under normal circumstances, the power that someone received after awakening could not be increased. As such, a hunter's power was fixed at the amount they received in their first awakening. This was not the case for the reawakened hunters. Leaping over their original limit, there were cases of C-rank hunters becoming A-rank, and B-rank hunters becoming S-rank. Woo Jin-Kyol gulped. Sung Jin-Woo, if he underwent a reawakening and achieved a power of an S-rank, no, perhaps even a greater power, it's possible that he single-handedly took care of the monsters described by the survivors. The association employee recalled the enemies from the gruesome tales, especially that statue of God. The survivors described how it was able to disintegrate a C-rank hunter just with its eye beams. To slay that kind of a monster in an unconscious state, just what kind of power were they talking about here? In preparation of such a possibility, the association had put a moratorium on the information regarding incident and requested the silence of all those involved. The reason why Sung Jin-Woo was placed in a private room in the hospital and provided the best medical assistance was the same. Woo Jin-Kyol's heartbeat quickened. Perhaps there's a chance that Korea might be able to obtain a nation-level hunter for, an existence whose individual might surpass that of nuclear weapons. The number of nation-level hunters across the world was in the single digits. Woo Jin-Kyol contained his excitement at the thought of such power being born here in his own country. Thankfully, it was easy to confirm a person's reawakening. Woo Jin-Kyol gestured to his subordinate. Bring it. And the man went to the corner and carefully took something out of a bag. Is that? Woo Jin-Kyol responded before Jin-Woo could finish his question. It's a tool to measure magic power 5. It was a portable version of the association's official measurement device, located at their headquarters. But the difference in their capabilities were not that big. Just place your hand here. He gestured towards the magic core embedded on top of the device. A size of a human fist, its black color was reminiscent of a black hole. The core was something that came from A-rank magic beasts. The highest quality item that carried a price of 1 billion won. Seeing his silent gaze towards the magic core, Woo Jin-Kyol asked again with a stern expression. This will be crucial to our investigation of the incident. May we ask for your cooperation? Jin-Woo nodded. Reawakening. The thing of his dreams. If it truly had happened to him, it would completely turn his life around. And if they were offering to check it for free, why shouldn't he accept? He placed his hand on the magic core, and the stone responded by radiating a faint light. The association employees' foreheads moistened with cold sweat. Then the light surrounding the magic core disappeared. Removing his sunglasses, Woo Jin-Kyol checked the results. His eyes started shaking at what he saw. This can't be. No matter how many times he checked, the numbers stayed the same. How could this be? How could the magic power of a man who had the qualifications to obtain a hunter license be only 10? Even though they stood at the lowest of the ranks, the average magic power of an E-rank hunter was still between 70 and 100. Compared to this, Sung Jin-Woo was barely above an ordinary person. Is it reawakening? If it is, what rank am I now? Jin-Woo clenched his sweating hands. Looking at the responses of the HSD staff, he suspected a great result. Meanwhile, Woo Jin-Kyol looked at Jin-Woo's historical data and the current results. His first result was 12, and 4 years later, 10. It decreased by 2. But that's within a margin of error. So it was not the fault of the measuring device. Sung Jin-Woo's powers were simply incredibly weak. The fact that he was able to come this far was nothing short of a miracle. Concluding that any more time spent was time wasted, Woo Jin-Kyol rose from his seat. Let's go. Yes, sir. Jin-Woo started speaking to the two men who were packing up. Wait, please say something. Woo Jin-Kyol nodded at the young man. Thank you for your cooperation. If you remember anything else, please feel free to contact us. Moving as if they wanted to be somewhere else, The two men quickly left the hospital. The hospital room that felt cramped until moments ago now felt empty. Jin-Woo rubbed the back of his neck. Guess it was nothing after all apostrophe. Now that he thought about it, other than the fact that his condition felt great, nothing else seemed different about him. And even if he had undergone reawakening, it was probably impossible for him to defeat all the enemies in that place. I wonder if Hunter Choi Jong-in, the strongest soldier, or Hunter Go Gun-hee, the S-rank among S-ranks, could have taken them on. As he had never seen those two in action, he had no way of knowing. There were a lot of secrets behind the information regarding the S-rank hunters, whose existences were regarded highly as the clouds in the sky. It was in that moment of contemplation, he noted something. In front of his eyes, words were floating in the middle of the air. "You have unread messages?" ? He closed his eyes then opened them. "You have unread messages." The floating letters did not disappear. He shook his head and rubbed his eyes, but the words still remained. He put his palms to his forehead and lowered his head. On top of hearing voices, "Now I'm seeing things." Did something happen to his head? He recalled the condition known as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Having lost a large number of comrades, his own life reaching the brink of death, it was not weird that his mind might have broken down somehow. But before he could settle on that simple conclusion, there was something else lingering in his mind. He looked towards his legs. The leg that had been cleanly removed by that statue's shield was now attached to his body, as if nothing had ever happened. A temple hidden away in a double dungeon, the voice in his head, the spontaneous healing of his leg, and now this message. Too many things were happening. What if the occurrences were not separate instances, but connected somehow? As he arrived at that conclusion, the thoughts that clouded his head cleared up a little. Okay. He raised his head, with his agitation gone, and his heart feeling lighter. His curiosity turned to the contents of the message. Perhaps it contained the clues that may help him solve the many mysteries. He stretched his hands toward the floating words. They passed right through them. Guess it's not a touch screen. He was too used to using a smartphone and couldn't think of another way. As he wondered on how he would open the message, he recalled his last moments in the temple. Right. He remembered his last interaction with the mysterious voice was through words. Then I should just give the commands in my head or speak them out loud. To test his theory, Jin-Woo repeated all the phrases he could think of that might work. Confirm message. Confirm message. Check message. View. I'll view. Show me. Show me. What do you want to see so much? He turned his head toward the voice, peeking through the half-opened door. His little sister in her school uniform was coldly staring at him. Jin-Woo was at a loss for words. An Oppa 6, that was making a request to the ceiling for something. He could not find the words to explain. Notes. 1. Hunter Surveillance Department, Surveillance, Monitoring plus Department. I've decided to add Hunter in front of the department to distinguish it going forward and will shorten it to HSD when they come up again. 2. Second Awakening, lit. Awakening after awakening, but I shortened to second awakening due to the usage as a noun in the passage. No impact on story down the line. 3. Reawakening, this is more literal translation than the above. 4. Nation level, nation, country plus power, authority plus level. I shortened it to nation level. 5. It's a tool to measure magic power, pretty straightforward. Magic power plus measurement device. 6. Oppa, like Arjusi, a commonly used Korean noun. A way for little sisters to call their older brothers. It's also used in general population between unrelated people, female addressing an older male of a close age. Chapter 9. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Did you hurt your head? His little sister asked from the door. Jin-Woo shook his head. No. Not comforted by his words. His sister's eyes were filled with concern. You're really okay, right? I told you. Yes. His little sister huffed and puffed as she started approaching him with a piercing gaze. Used to her reactions in situations like this, Jin-Woo put up his guard as his little sister started hitting him. I told you to stop getting hurt. Do you know how much I was worried? Sorry. Everyone else seems to do just fine. Why are you the only one getting hurt all the time? Sorry. The hands that were striking him slowly lost their strength. Eventually, Jinna stood with her head hung low, tears falling down her cheeks. Jin-Woo patted his sister on the back, doing his best to comfort her. He held back the tears forming in his own eyes. To think I was prepared to die to leave her behind apostrophe. Thank God he had returned alive. Looking at this moment, he realized just how many times he came close to death. It was like being in a nightmare. Jin-Woo turned his gaze toward the words suspended in air. You have unread messages, and it still feels like I haven't woken up apostrophe. He could not understand the meaning behind the words. Still, what could he do? The most important thing was the fact that he was able to return to his family alive. Sniff. Fortunately, his sister had stopped crying. Unfortunately, her aunt at his condition continued for another hour. So do you understand? If you get hurt again, I'll give up my studies and go straight into working, so you won't be able to work as a hunter ever again. A sharp, piercing gaze that was unbecoming of her pretty face. She was truly her brother's sister. I got it, I got it. Jin-Woo nodded in resignation. After receiving his confirmation multiple times, Jinna got up, satisfied. Where are you going? School. I just got permission to leave briefly to come and see you. But I have to go back. Right. The college entrance examinations are next year. Although he could not afford to provide a tutor or send her to a private school, Jinna still managed to become one of the top students in the school. Her goal, to become a doctor. The little girl who could not distance herself from video games suddenly became a fervent student when their mother fell ill few years ago. Jin-Woo wanted to make sure her dreams came true. Wait, video games? His eyes suddenly shot open. I'm going. Jin-Woo quickly caught his sister, who was leaving. Jinna. What? When you play a game? Jinna smiled. I don't play games these days. There's so little time until I'm in my final year. I know, but I still wanted to ask. About what? Oppa, have you been playing games lately? Although she had put them behind, she was very good in her past. As such, her brother's question flared her interest. Jin-Woo continued to stare at the floating letters and asked, if I have an unread message in a game, how do I open or access it? First, you have to open the message box. Open the message box. Ring. The moment he spoke the words open, an electronic beep followed the opening of the message box. You have 2 unread messages. Welcome to becoming a player. Unread. Daily quest. The preparation to become powerful has arrived. Unread. Jin-Woo felt himself being filled with joy. It worked. Surprised by the sudden appearance of happiness in his face, Jin-Woo anxiously asked, What game is it? Do you need my help? Jin-Woo firmly shook his head. No, I want to try it out alone. How would his sister react if he told her everything that was happening to him? Don't want to hear from my own sister that I'm crazy. So Jin-Woo swallowed the words he wanted to say and bid her goodbye. After confirming that she went down the elevator out of the hospital, Jin-Woo returned to his room. Can't repeat the same mistake. Click. Lock. To avoid any unwanted attention, he locked the doors. Finishing his preparation, Jin-Woo sat on the side of his bed and started reading the messages floating before his eyes. Welcome to becoming a player. Unread. Daily quest. The preparation to become powerful has arrived. Unread. The first message seemed familiar to him. Where was it? I've definitely heard this one before. He started with the first message. Open. Ring. This system will help with the growth of the player. Non-compliance with this system's instructions may result in a penalty. Your reward has been received. He remembered now. It was the words he heard before losing consciousness. It said something about a player back then, to apostrophe. But just like that time, he had no idea what that meant. System. Growth. Penalty. Reward. It was a parade of unclear meanings. Just what is it helping grow, and what is it rewarding? He found it difficult to apply these words that he saw in video games before. Ignoring the meaning of the words for now, he went on to the next message. Daily quest. The preparation to become powerful has arrived. Unread. Gulp. Jin-Woo swallowed at the suspicious title of the message. His heartbeat sped up. Open. Ring. Daily quest. The preparation to become powerful. Do 100 push-ups. Incomplete. 0-100. Do 100 sit-ups. Incomplete. 0-100. Do 100 squats. Incomplete. 0-100. Run 10 kilometers, incomplete, 0-10. Warning. Failing to complete the daily quest will result in a penalty quest. Jin-Woo moaned after confirming the message. Sigh, what is this? Daily quest. On top of that, a preparation to become powerful. He expected more than just simple exercises with a title like that. At least, it was certain if he completed the exercises in the quest, his body would probably improve a little. Was this the growth and reward the system spoke of? Now that I think about it apostrophe. He recalled reading those with inner problems should listen to their inner voice in some book before. Guess I'm just hallucinating what my body's telling me. His urge to become stronger must have been so strong that he was now seeing these nonsensical words in the air. More so than how laughable it was, he was disappointed. If you can just become strong like this, who wouldn't have done so already? He shook his head in disbelief. He felt pathetic in the expectation that he would find all the answers in these messages. I don't care. Jin-Woo went to lie down in the bed. He stared up into the ceiling. Although he was not doing anything in particular, time passed by quickly. As he began to feel the weight of silence throughout the hospital, he suddenly sat up. Still apostrophe. What if this did bring about change? Half in anticipation, half in suspicion. The thought of should I just give it a try occurred in his head. Can't hurt after all. What if he just lightly tried out one of the motions? After some thought, he made the decision to give it a try. Lightly stretching after getting off the bed, he attempted to do half-hearted push-ups. Instead of getting on the ground, he stood up at an angle and pushed off the bed. 1, 2, 3. Starting at 1, he rapidly went down the line. 97, 98, 99, 100. Finishing what he started, he reached his 100th push-up. Contrary to his expectation, nothing seemed to change except for his slightly sore arms. So now what? He stood up with a smile on his face. Welcome to becoming a player. Read. Daily quest. The preparation to become powerful has arrived. Read. The previously unread messages had become read. The words telling him that he had unread messages had disappeared, but he no longer had any intention to continue entertaining these delusions. He felt he had done enough. Without any regrets, he closed the message window. With a yawn, he returned to his bed. In response to moving after such a long time, he started feeling sleepy. The window outside glowed orange from the sunset. Is it this late already? The man from the Hunter Surveillance Department explained earlier that his hospital bills would be footed by the association. With that in mind, Jin-Woo was not in a rush to be discharged. Maybe I'll have the hospital run some tests. Make sure I'm completely healthy, he thought as he lay in bed. I'm sure the hallucinations should disappear after some time. His eyelids slowly closed. Soon, he fell into deep slumber. Tick tick tick. As he slept, the clock on the opposite wall continued to tick. As time passed, the hands of the clock eventually pointed to 11:59 and 57 seconds. Tick. 58. Tick. 59. Tick. 60. The clock pointed to 12 o'clock. Ring. You failed to complete the daily quest. You will be moved to the penalty zone for a set duration. Shake. Jin-Woo opened his eyes to an intense trembling that shook his entire body. Earthquake. He shot up and grabbed the bed frame at the foot of the bed. The trembling was so strong that he found it difficult to hold on. Shake. But with each passing second, the tremors became worse. Suddenly, PSSSH. The bed frame he held onto for his life broke. No, it had disappeared from his hands. He checked his hands. There was no sign of the bed frame. Instead, there was sand on his palms. Sand? PSSSSH. Rest of the frames on the bed turned to sand, and the trembling became even stronger. Shake. Uwak. Unable to hold on, he was eventually thrown off the bed. Jin-Woo screamed as he bounced up and down in his room. One by one, all the furniture and items in his room turned into sand. Uwak. Crash. Jin-Woo suddenly found himself embedded in something. His fingertips felt the softness of sand around him. The earth shake had stopped. Spit spit. As he spat out the sand that entered his mouth, he raised his head. ? He found himself in the middle of a vast desert. Patting the sand off his body, he stood up and looked around. In every direction, he saw an endless field of sand, stretching to the horizon. A desert? There was no logical explanation for this. Until moments ago, He was resting on a hospital bed in the middle of Seoul. He grabbed a handful of sand and let it fall. The sand fell in a straight line to the ground. There's no wind, not just wind. Looking up, there was no sun, moon or even stars. An empty sky like black ink spilled across a canvas. Even stranger. Despite the lack of a visible light source, he had no trouble seeing his surroundings. Where am I? Chapter 10. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Panicking, Jin-Woo tried to get a grasp of the situation. Suddenly, he heard the sound of sand shifting. The sand on the ground next to him was sinking into the ground. Uh-oh. Using all his strength, Jin-Woo struggled to not be sucked into the whirlpool. As the sunken area became wider, Jin-Woo barely escaped the sinkhole using his two hands. Pant, pant, pant. As he sat panting, he looked down into the newly created depression on the ground. The sand at the lowest point of the hole was boiling strangely. Jin-Woo shuddered as he realized a single misstep would have resulted in him falling down into that hole. Wait. His eyes narrowed. It's not boiling. Taking a closer look, he realized something big was wriggling beneath the sand at the bottom of the depression. Jin-Woo stood up instinctively. Something did not feel right. Confirming his suspicions, a pillar of sand shot up from the hole as he was walking backwards. Sounding like a waterfall, the sand fell all around him, revealing what had appeared from the hole. Jin-Woo's eyes widened. A bug, a giant centipede had risen out of the sand. Screech. The fully revealed form of the monster stood taller than a 5-story building. Jin-Woo gulped. This is impossible apostrophe. And like so, it was an impossibly large existence. He had never heard of a centipede of this size before. But it wasn't just the size of the centipede that shocked Jin-Woo. Why is there a name floating above that thing's head? Was he dreaming? He closed his eyes and opened them again. Nothing had changed. The centipede's name floated above its head in red letters, like a video game monster. Poison-fanged giant sand centipede 1. Alongside its uncanny and dangerous-looking figure, it had a name that screamed at him to run, especially the poison-fanged part. Two fangs the size of a child caught Jin-Woo's eye. It was very clear from its name what would happen if he was pierced by them. Jin-Woo saw the centipede's mouth open and close repeatedly without rest. Looks like it's hungry. At that time, a sound rang through his head. Ring. Penalty quest. Survive. Goal. Survive for the required time. Required time, 4 hours. Remaining time, 4 hours 0 minutes 0 sec. You're kidding, right? But the second the remaining time decreased to 3 hours 59 minutes 59 sec, the centipede started moving across the sand as if it was waiting. Slide. Wait, what? Jin-Woo quickly turned and started running. Tripping, he fell and rolled on the ground and quickly shook the sand off his head. His eyes widened looking at the sight before him. There were more pillars of sand appearing in front of him. Before he realized it, 7 centipede heads had risen from the ground and were staring down at him. Screech. Jin-Woo's face paled as he heard their terrifying shrieks. Cheat. Exactly 4 hours later, he reappeared in the hospital room. Collapse. Lying on the floor of his room, he coughed in agony. Cough cough spit spit. The inside of his mouth was dry. His eyes stung from the sand. Jin-Woo sprawled out on the ground, moaning. He did not have the strength to even move a finger. What was that? A new message appeared before the panting Jin-Woo. Ring. You've completed the penalty quest. His brows furrowed. Penalty quest. Did he do something to deserve punishment? Searching his memories, he remembered the daily quest that he half-heartedly gave up on. It can't be apostrophe. He recalled the part of the quest that talked about receiving a penalty if he did not complete it. You mean that wasn't a hallucination? Indeed. It was not a hallucination, nor a dream. There was no need to check by pinching his cheeks. The pain of running until his breath ran out. The pain of being scratched by the centipede's legs. He felt them all even right now. It was all real. He had almost met his death back there. This is too much. To think that something like a penalty would throw him into the jaws of death. At the same time, a foreboding dread washed over him. If what just happened now was due to the daily quest, it meant that all of this was not over yet. As if on cue, the electronic sound rang. Ring. Startled at first, He relaxed as he realized it was not another quest. The reward for completing the penalty quest has arrived. Would you like to verify? Y/N, reward. The word reward briefly caught his attention. Unfortunately, Jin-Woo lacked the strength to care about anything at the moment. It was a testament to how tough the penalty quest had been. Reward or whatever, I just want to rest for now apostrophe. And with that, he fell into a deep slumber. Oh no. Why is he on the ground? Next morning, his assigned nurse was greeted with a shocking scene when she entered the room. The patient was lying on the floor, and there was sand scattered about the ground. Even the patient's clothes were filled with sand. The nurse threw the treatment chart onto the bed and pressed the call button. Someone come help. Soon, Dr. Ju Chi-Yui arrived. What's the matter? Why is Mr. Sung on the ground? I'm not sure. He was fine until last night. I found him like this just now. Let's first get him onto the bed. 1, 2. The two put Jin-Woo onto the bed. In the rough movement, the medical chart that was thrown on the bed made a small paper cut on the back of Jin-Woo's hand, but no one noticed. Now, let's check him. Ju Chi-Yui went over Jin-Woo's condition, but found no abnormalities. What's this? He's just sleeping. He sighed in relief. The Hunter Association had requested special care for this patient. He had been nervous in fear that something had happened to him. Let's just let him rest. He seems to be in deep sleep. After he spoke, Ju Chi-Yui began to leave when he noticed the sand in the room. Looks like we should clean up this room a little. Miss Yura, I'll leave it to you. Understood, doctor. As the doctor left the room, Nurse Choyura also relaxed in relief. It was a good thing nothing bad had happened. After all, there were no doctors or nurses who wished ill upon their patients. The hospital she worked at was specially dedicated to the treatment of hunters. Having seen the unfortunate end of many hunters before, she did not want to see yet another hunter be hurt under her care. Phew. Calm down. She began to figure out how to clean the room when she noticed something on the ground. It was a drop of blood. Oh my. The drop of blood had fallen from the patient's hand that stretched out from the bed over the ground. Surprised, she looked for a wound on Jin-Woo's hand and held it in inspection. Turning over to the back of his hand, she saw traces of fresh blood, but no scar. Wiping away the blood, the hand was completely clean. Did his cut heal in an instant? With concern, Yura looked over to Jin-Woo's face. He appeared to be sleeping without a care in the world. 7. Daily Quest. Ring. The daily quest has arrived. Jin-Woo's eyes shot open. Sitting straight up from the bed, the first thing Jin-Woo did was to check the time. It was a little past 4:30 in the afternoon. There was roughly 7 hours and 30 minutes of breathing room until midnight. Good. He opened the message box. Ring. Daily Quest. The preparation to become powerful. Do 100 push-ups. Incomplete. 0-100. Do 100 sit-ups. Incomplete. 0-100. Do 100 squats. Incomplete. 0-100. Run 10 kilometers. Incomplete. 0-10. Warning: failing to complete the daily quest will result in a penalty quest. Same thing? He uttered reflexively. No, perhaps this was a good thing. Compared to a possibly difficult quest, this was much better. Even if it strained his body, it was at least something that could be completed with time. He went on the floor and began the push-ups. 1. He couldn't afford to be dragged to some strange place and be forced to run from death again. 2. He got lucky last night. He didn't feel like he would get lucky again. 3. He paused to look up at the quest screen. The numbers were rising accordingly with each push-up. Ring. You've succeeded in doing 1 push-up. Do 100 push-ups. Incomplete. 7/100ths. Ring. You've succeeded in doing 1 push-up. Do 100 push-ups. Incomplete. 8/100ths. As if testing the system, he performed a half-hearted push-up, going only part way down, but it did not register on the screen. He understood why his weak attempts last night did nothing. Sigh. Really? Although exasperated, he did not let up the strength in his arms. 50 push-ups remaining. After that would be sit-ups, then squats, then running. 3 hours later. Do 100 push-ups. Complete 100/100ths. Do 100 sit-ups. Complete 100/100ths. Do 100 squats. Complete 100/100ths. Run 10 kilometers. Incomplete. 9/10ths. Pant, 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 pant. Having run a lap around the area outside, Jin-Woo bowed over, huffing. His heart felt like it was about to explode, but he knew he could not stop here. If I think about the effort up until now apostrophe. He entered the hospital gates and completed the last stretch of his run. Ring. Distance ran, 10 kilometers. You've succeeded in running 10 kilometers. It was finally over. Pant pant. He fell to his knees. His lungs were on fire. His forehead and back were soaked. Pant pant. Sweating profusely, he attempted to control his breathing when a familiar message arrived. Ring. You've completed the daily quest, the preparation to become powerful. The reward for completing the quest has arrived. Would you like to verify? Yes/no. He almost wanted to forget about it like yesterday but changed his mind. He wanted to confirm just what this damn reward was. Yes. Ring. You've received the below rewards. Reward 1. Status recovery. Reward 2. Stat points +3. Reward 3. Random box X1. Accept all. Why is there so many? Was his first thought after looking at the rewards screen. But after thinking about it, he noticed some useful rewards and rewards he was curious about. Feeling like he was about to pass out any moment from now, the first reward caught his eyes. Having experienced the penalty involved in failure, he knew there was a good chance that its rewards were just as real. It couldn't hurt. Probably won't throw me in the penalty zone after offering me a reward. Accept. Notes. 1. Poison-fanged giant sand centipede. The name translation is almost word for word literal.